In this episode of the TOWTalk Podcast, Neil and I discuss gaslighting here in the town with regard to our financial woes. Then we talk about party loyalty and how that can lead to exploitation of constituents. And also, we touch on the gerrymandering situation going across the country. But before we get started, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Click that bell so you get notified when new videos drop and when we go live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Without any further delay, let's get into it. Good afternoon. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. Today is, of course, Sunday, May 10th, Mother's Day, and you are with TOWTalk. And I'm Denise. I'm here with Neil. And today we are going to go over some local issues. We're going to move on to just have a little discussion about party loyalty, moving into what is happening in Virginia, and how that affects voters here and across the country. So Neil, we have some stuff going on locally in the town. Once again, the finances are at issue, with the other side sort of trying to say there's nothing to see here. So could you kind of give us a background as to what's going on and then bring us up to date?
Yeah, they're doubling down on the nothing to see here topic, right? So let's get into some background. We can go back, if we want to go back, we can go back to 2017 when I was basically being told you're not getting any financial information, in which case I was sitting there yelling, I want financial information. And I was on the town board. I was a councilman for the town for a number of years, and they refused to provide it to me. And so much so that I had to threaten to sue the town. That's how far it came.
Really?
I actually hired an attorney and threatened to sue the town because they refused to provide me financial information. But yet nothing's wrong. Nothing to see here. Refused to give it to an accountant who they lied about. Remember, they said I wasn't an accountant, but I am an accounnt.
You're
Go
literally
figure, right?
comptroller in a nearby
Right.
town now.
Right. So let's get beyond that. Let's start with our current supervisor, who was the former supervisor back in 2021. Back in 2021, right, we, as in we, the town board and the town, hired O'Connor Davies to do a risk assessment. That risk assessment basically looked at the town's controls and said, you have none. Okay? You have no controls. This is in 2021. Okay? All right? And here I'm saying you have no controls. Money could be leaving and you have no idea, right? Money could be leaving the town and you have no idea. You have no controls. There is nobody reviewing the financial information at all, okay? That was back in 2021. What did they do in response to that? And to the fact that there was a councilman who was refusing to pay his water bill, okay? Right?
Oh my
So
God.
that was all happening. What did they decide to do? They decided to frame the supervisor, Dendanto,
Yes.
at the time, right, for harassment of the accountant of the town, right,
The
who was
gatekeeper
failing
of the
to
money.
provide, right, who oversaw the money and refused to provide any financial information to myself as deputy supervisor at the time and to the town supervisor. The law is clear on these things, and they were violating the law. So much so that the state comptroller had to come in 2022, right? The state comptroller's office came in, okay, and one of the auditors said, wow, you guys have no controls. So much so, he decided to actually steal the money himself. He was like, oh, wow, this is like a faucet. I can just take the money. And he did. Okay?
405,000 worth.
405,000, right? From 2022 to 2024, for over 2 years, he stole the money. So, and then in 2024, right, they lost their bond rating. So now what they're trying to tell you, okay, and this is the funniest part, they're trying to tell you, well, you didn't hear anything for 4 years. Well, Was there a press release about the 405,000 being stolen? No. Was there a press release from the town regarding the bond rating? No, because they hid everything. They did not discuss it. They didn't tell anybody. So yeah, you didn't hear about it. That is truthful because of the fact that they refused to tell you about it and disclose it to you.
Would they
Okay?
really want to advertise that while they're in control? No, they
Right.
didn't want you to know
Right.
that, right? What was that make them look at? So, no, I think they were hoping that this would, either stay buried or they could bring it out if they lost power, and what happened is that didn't work out that way.
Well, it's you sit there and you have this idea. It's the idea that if you don't discuss something, then it didn't happen. And that's just not the way the world works. So everybody take a step back into your personal lives. Sometimes the consequences of an action don't you don't see that for some time. It could be years before the consequences of an action rears its ugly head. We always talk about consequences of actions. Well, their consequences of not doing their job had led to the town's loss of the bond rating and the stolen money. That was years in the making. It wasn't something that just happened overnight. It was years in the making because of negligence, because they failed to do their job, and yet now want to turn around and say, well, there were no financial issues for 4 years. But there were. What happened was is when Frank came in 2021, he sounded an alarm, okay? And that alarm was, hey, we need to get this shit together, otherwise there are going to be consequences. Well, now are the time when you face those consequences. Yeah, there weren't consequences right then and there. Oh my God, there weren't consequences right then and there. Have we become such a society where everything has to happen like right then? There has to be an immediate consequence to an action.
And if there isn't, it didn't happen because we are so reactionary now. There
Right.
must if
So
it happened, why wasn't there a reaction then? Because they were burying it.
so let
That's
me
why.
ask you a question. This, and I mean, I know we're going to go into this a little later, but just kind of like want to touch on this a little bit. Does that mean none of those victims of Jeffrey Epstein happened because there were no consequences?
Good question.
Right.
Or because
This is the problem that we have today in politics. The consequences of actions that are happening today, we don't see for a while. It could be months, it could be years. Everybody keeps talking about what's happening. Everything under Biden was all Biden's fault. A lot of those things were a result of actions that Trump took that we were paying for years later. And we are going to continue paying for those now that they've done that one big beautiful bill, the crappy bill that will have consequences for decades to come. In fact, this entire administration, there'll be consequences for decades to come. So this idea that well, there aren't consequences today, so we don't have to, so they didn't happen. Well, I'm sorry, my gas prices are going up. Everything's going up. There are consequences. So when we talk about the town, some of these consequences didn't come to fruition for a long time. Day one, the supervisor, Frank D'Anto, gets into office, okay, and he's told, we don't have the money to make payroll.
yeah.
I can tell you exactly why that occurred and why for 4 years that we didn't see anything. We didn't hear anything. We didn't know other than the fact that we lost the bond rating and the money was stolen. So I want to thank Luisa and Gracia, the town clerk, for fulfilling my foil regarding the ARPA money. ARPA was American Rescue Plan money. It was money that was given to municipalities right during COVID. It was called COVID money. We all called it COVID money. The town
Okay.
received $2.8 million in COVID money. What did they do with the $2.8 million? Operating costs. They used it to balance their budget.
Because they knew that they were
They had
over
no money. Yes,
they had no
they
money.
knew that they had no money, and the best way to fill in the gaps was utilizing the ARPA money. Well, there is no ARPA money left. They didn't raise taxes the way that they were supposed to because they wanted to win an election. Everything was about maintaining power and winning elections. They didn't care. And now all of a sudden the taxpayers have to suffer at the hands of these idiots who were in office.
Because of their
And that's what they
incompetence.
were. They're incompetent.
Now, let me ask you a question. With regard to the ARPA money, what was that meant to be used for? What did they want that to be used for? Or was there a reason?
It, it, there were so many things that were occurring at that time. The problem is that there was, you know, we were given mandates to stay home. So some of the employees ended up having to work. They were considered to be essential employees. Your local municipal government, really everybody's an essential employee.
Yeah.
So the idea is to help supplement some of that income. It was also because of the supply chain issues that we saw,
Yeah.
okay? The federal government stepped in and said we want to basically bear some of the burden of the increased costs because
Okay.
we understand we are redirecting manufacturers to manufacture other things, and some of the things that you need may cost more
Got it.
as a result. In addition, we had to buy a lot of PPE. Okay.
Yes.
So, because everybody had to be masked, everybody had to wear gloves, we were client facing. So you had to put up those like plastic barriers everywhere where if somebody came into the building, there was a plastic barrier. So that way, if somebody was coughing, they weren't coughing on an employee. We wanted to protect our employees. So it was supposed to be for like all of that. And based on your municipality size, determined how much money you got. So the town had received back then $2.8 million. Okay. And these idiots didn't know how to spend the money, waited to the last minute, and decided in the last like 2 years that they were going to put a lot of the money into basically operating. So things that you would normally want to purchase through your operating costs, they bought using ARPA money. They basically planted it in their budget and they said, well, we can use ARPA money for this. And basically ARPA money was a supplement of revenue. So you could use ARPA money for pretty much whatever you wanted at that point in time. It really
But
wasn't too much on it,
right.
too much
But
restriction on it.
assuming you were getting your tax revenue and some of your other your usual ratables, um that shouldn't cover that much, that might not have been that much of a shortfall that you needed 2.8 million or no.
No, but so one of the points I want to make, right, goes back to their budgeting. Okay? Right? So they want to put themselves out there and portray themselves as having passed balanced budgets for the last like 4 years. Okay? Right?
They're funny.
I am sorry. You don't understand what a balanced budget is. It fucking kills me, right? It really fucking kills me that these idiots don't even know what a balanced budget is. A balanced budget means no spending of fund balance. A balanced budget means that your revenues equal your expenses. Every year for the last 4 years, they budgeted $2 to $3 million in a budget deficit. I pointed this out every fucking year I was on the board that this is what they were doing. In the last 2 years, it was like $2.4, $2.6 million. And now it's like $2.8 million. A budget deficit is not a balanced budget. A budget
Right.
deficit is a budget deficit. That is deficit spending. That means you are spending your savings to balance your budget. I don't understand these people don't understand the terminology, and they think because that they can just go out and say whatever it is that they want and people will believe them. And that gets into our next topic. So I'm not even going to bother like talking about that because we're going to talk about that in a second. But that's really what it is. It's people buying whatever it is that they're selling. And I'm sorry, that's garbage. Just go to the page, go to the website, look at the revenues of the budget, and you will see that little budget item, fund balance, right? Appropriated fund balance, and you will see $2.8 million in your general fund. That is deficit spending. That is not a balanced budget. So they had no balanced budget. They were using the ARPA money to help balance their budget, to cover operating costs because they didn't have the money to do it. And they're like, oh, but we had money. That's not a problem. Well, you had money because you were spending money in places that you shouldn't have been spending money. And that goes to show you that they didn't know how to budget. They didn't know how to manage money. They didn't really know what they were doing. They were just like, we have a pool of money. We just need to spend it. And that's it.
Now, just to clarify, when it comes to this budget balancing, that is also part of the responsibility of the comptroller and the accounting
No,
department, correct? No?
no, nope.
So the board has to do that.
I am sorry. Listen, your accounting department, basically their job is to just supply numbers. Okay.
Okay,
Right. Their job is really just to account for the numbers and supply them to the board. Okay.
got it.
Your budget officer, who in most towns is your supervisor, is the one who is responsible for the budget. So for the last 4 years, it was George. Okay. George was responsible for that $2.8 million being in the budget. Now you had 3 dumbasses as board members who voted for it, who kept voting for it and didn't ask any questions and didn't want anybody else to see the numbers. I can tell you, I asked, and you can go back to that last meeting when we voted, and I specifically said, am I going to get the information I requested regarding all the backup for all these numbers? Mark Coyne looked at me and he said, no, we're not giving you anything. Vote no. We don't give a shit. That's what they said to me. Okay.
Wow.
So I'm like sick and tired of these lies, as if somehow there weren't warning signs, as if there wasn't. So now we have the consequences of those actions. Like, listen, Ralph Carr may have came in and he may not have said anything. He may have just said, fuck everything. I'm not going to say anything and I'll just start cutting. All right. And we can blame something else. Okay. And nobody would say anything. But at this point in time, you have a budget that's upside down. You have operating costs that aren't covered by your tax dollars. Okay. And you have a budget deficit of roughly $3 million. And because you borrowed from this year's tax revenue to pay last year's expenses, right? Because they did that. Okay. You're now $4 million in the hole.
Wow. And that's
Okay.
another question that I wanted to ask. With regard to this constant budget deficit, is that what they were doing all along? Drawing from the following year's taxes to pay for last year's debts that they were running up?
One would think, but so as near as I can tell on this, okay, and you have to kind of go back. So prior to the state comptroller's office coming in 2022, it looks like what was going on was that they were severely understating revenues and reporting revenues to the state. I mean, that came out in that report that we had from the state comptroller's office, the summary, the financial management summary. It basically said you're overestimating expenses and you're underestimating revenues. That came out in a huge way. They're basically saying you guys aren't budgeting correctly. Your budgets are completely wrong.
No
And
surprise.
so it looks like what had happened is that so those results came out fairly quickly. They changed that in the 23 budget and 24 budget. So in the 23 and 24 budget, that $2.8 million budget. They didn't decrease the deficit, like their deficit spending, right? That just we're like, okay, well, we'll boost the revenues, right? We'll continue overestimating expenses, but they really weren't overestimating expenses because they were spending more and they didn't really know what they were spending money on, but they thought they were. And they were actually deficit spending in a large way for
Wow.
like 3 years, right? So you're talking almost $2 million, over 2 years, and they were like what, at $12 million in whatever it was. They had $12 million in cash in 2022. So, all of a sudden, and then you had the money that was stolen, and then you had the money that was um paid to settle lawsuits and all this other kind of crap. Next thing, and all the accounting fees.
God.
And so now you're talking another $1 million, because now they're like, once they realize, like, oh shit, there are consequences. We can't borrow money because we lost our bond
Oops.
rating. Oops. All of a sudden they had to spend. So now they spent over $1 million just on the accounting, right, to try to fix the accounting, which still isn't fixed. So, now all of a sudden they spent, what, $7-8 million of that that savings that we had. That $12 million, which doesn't leave much in return. And then you got to remember, a lot of, right, when you talk about revenues and expenses, it's all timing too. So
Okay.
when you start adjusting for timing differences of when you receive certain money and all that kind of stuff, there's a really good chance, at year end, you have no money.
And here we are. That's pretty much where we're at right now. And
Right.
so, just to kind of summarize, folks, don't be gaslit, because that's what they're doing. They're
Yes.
gaslighting you. They're figuring that you have a short-term memory, that you don't have a brain, and that if they tell you what you want to hear, you're going to believe them because it's what you want to hear. But the fact of the matter is that the money was stolen during Serrano's time. The bond rating was lost during Serrano's time. During the last 4 years, all this stuff happened. And they're trying to say there was nothing said. You think they're going to admit to you that they have problems? Of course they're not gonna do that, and now there's another administration in, and there's now there's a different majority, so stuff is actually getting done, and stuff is coming out, and it's not good. So they're attacking it to say, "We didn't this stuff didn't come out over the last 4
Right.
years." Yeah, it was there. They just didn't tell you. That's the point of this. And so, this kinda is gonna sorta roll into our next topic regarding party loyalty. We're for and maybe and maybe Neil can explain this a little bit better than I can, but what I'm seeing here is that if your party tells you what you want to hear, you never question it. And if the other side says something that challenges that, you question it up and down because it's not, because you're loyal to your party and forgetting that these are just people that are in these parties. And they're not necessarily loyal to party as much as they're loyal to themselves. And that's what's happening here. You have a group of people that are covering up serious financial problems in our town. And people are hearing this message that there's nothing to see there and it's what you want to hear, so you tend to believe them, but it's turning out to not be the truth, and you're not willing to listen to the people and listen to the message and listen to the facts. And so you know, I want to talk a little bit more about how we're more loyal to parties, and it allows those parties to exploit the voters and exploit their supporters because people become so they just put the blinders on. You know what I'm saying?
But that's both parties.
Oh yeah,
You know? And
absolutely I agree
and
with that.
and 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 that's what's really, that's why I say, all the time, look at any district and you will see that the number of voters who are unaffiliated with either party now outnumber those voters that are registered to a given party, because both parties, and I'm talking party level. I'm not talking about individuals running for a given party, right? Because individuals are different, right? But you look at both parties, and both parties are being paid for by the same people.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
Now, locally, again, I go to what is the background of the individual who's supporting that individual, what are the goals of that individual who's running for office, and do they understand the office that they're running for? Okay. So just taking a step back locally, and then we'll kind of build up to where it is nationally, right? You know, Frank as a small business owner. He's managed, finances. He understands what and how important it is to get those finance numbers in check, right? And I've seen a lot of people who think they can do the job and can't, and I've seen a lot of people who can, who get in there and do the job. Okay. And, I am not seeing anything from her, right? Where she is coming out and she can do this job. Just because you were in real estate doesn't mean anything. You're selling a piece of property that somebody else has owned and managed for years. And your job is to just basically say, okay, this is within your price range. That's
Yeah,
it,
it's
and to try to get your commission. That's it.
yeah, that's exactly it. So, you know, think about that. And I want to point something else out. During the spill the tea meeting that we had, uh, Frank actually, he's very, very diplomatic. He doesn't really like to talk much about the election, but he did briefly touch on it. He actually described himself more as independent. He ran on the
Yes.
Democratic Party, but he is, either he's independent or unaffiliated. I have to look back. I recorded that, by the way, the entire thing, so
No,
I'll
he's registered Democrat, but he considers himself to be more independent minded.
okay, okay. That's what he talked about. That's what he talked about. Okay, I'm sorry. I digressed.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no, it's fine. Listen, everybody thinks that I sit here and I carry water for Frank, but I really don't. Me and him clashed more times, right, than I think the people on the other side. You look at some of those meetings and you look at those votes, you could see that I didn't vote with him every single chance I got. There wasn't like it wasn't like when George was in office and they just voted for everything George wanted. Okay?
Absolute yes
It
men.
was it was very different, and I have no problem speaking truth to power. And the fact is, if he does something wrong, I have no problem saying it. No
Yeah,
problem.
and I think that's what we're losing here. That actually just goes right to my point. Right? You just said it. You just said it. And whatever Serrano wanted, they all agreed, or whoever was
Right.
putting forth some sort of referendum, they all agreed. They didn't have an opinion. It was yes, 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 whatever you want. And we're seeing that all the way up at the top here, right? The federal level versus voices coming in and challenging. Why do you want this? What's going to be the impact? What are other options that we can look at to achieve the same goal? Nobody does that anymore because they are so loyal to the party. You can't question it. You can't question anybody, right? We can't have
Well,
challenge.
I think you said it best, right? The goal. What are the goals of both parties, right? And this goes to right party platforms. This goes to party loyalty, right? You know, I talk to a lot of Democrats and Republicans, and I'm always amused, right? Because Republicans love to talk about themselves as how they are, they're for states' rights and they don't want a big federal government, and they want, and they believe in freedom, and and all this other kind of crap, right? And Democrats all talk that, that they're for the environment and they're for taking care of people and they're for helping the poor, right? And they're for big government, and that can help people, right? Let's look at those two, right? Two sides. because none of that is true. Absolutely none of that is true. None of it from either side. Okay? You are living in a world that was created for you, right? Back in the 70s. Okay? You are literally living in that world, right? Like we see that world today play out when they put John Fetterman on TV and they say, well, he's the only moderate Democrat. I'm sorry, he votes with the Republicans,
He's not a Democrat at all.
95% of the time. Okay. And I personally don't view the Republicans' platform as being moderate. They're fascists. Okay. But they want to portray that Fetterman as being moderate in order to push all the Democrats, right, more to the right, as if they
Yes.
aren't as far to the right as it is right now. The fact is government is set up to intentionally, right, to intentionally be problems for people, right? Like, think about it, right? You go to the DMV, you have to fill out all these forms and you have to provide all this information and blah, 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 right? They're intentionally making it hard for you. Okay. It could be a lot easier. You shouldn't have to sit there and provide your birth certificate and your social security card and utility bill and blah, blah, blah to get a driver's license, right? Like, and 15 other pieces of identification, right? Just to get a driver's license and to register to vote. You shouldn't need that, but they intentionally make it hard. And then they charge you, right? And then they charge you for that inconvenience of having to put all that stuff together. Okay. You shouldn't need all that, right? They intentionally make it hard. And that's not just Republicans doing that. Democrats do that too. Look at us here in New York. We have more fucking paperwork to do the simplest thing, right? Than anywhere else. They make it intentionally difficult to access anything because they want it to be difficult, right? They don't want you to partake of those benefits. They don't want you to do certain things, right? And therefore they're going to make it as difficult as possible for you to do, right? And that's the end of it. And I don't know what to say. It's like, you look at both of these parties and, I was listening to Graham Plattner talk. And he's saying, this is it. This is the one chance we have to take back our government for the people.
Yes. Yeah.
I, I'm not really sure I believe that he's right about that. Not from the standpoint of like, this is our final opportunity. I think that has already passed. I think we've already given that up, but I'm going to give him all the credit I can for making that statement and for really pushing for those type of changes because whoever is next, whoever's in power next, right? If we have to deal with another 2 years of this, we aren't going to have a democracy anymore. That's it.
We've been downgraded so far. I think we're like 64th now on the list of democracies. We're like near the bottom of the list, and we're like
Of
a
everything.
democracy of everything.
Of everything. Healthcare, social services programs, education. We're at the bottom of everything.
And to return to your point about, Republicans not wanting big government, they want small government, and Democrats wanting big government. What accounts for big government? Is it people or is it money? Because I'm going to tell you what, if it's money, they're getting a lot of money, our money, and we're not getting anything for our money now. And they have, states' rights. My God, I have never seen such overreach from the federal government in like the history of this country. I mean, this is just unbelievable what is happening.
Okay, well, I recently heard, I think it was Steve Bannon on the radio, and
Sloppy
he said,
Steve.
and like him and whoever the hell he was with said that they're hoping that the Supreme Court overturns the 14th Amendment. Think about what that statement actually says, right? the Constitution are not laws. I know everybody looks at them as being laws. They are rights.
Yes.
Okay? They are inalienable rights. Okay? These are not rights that were provided by our government, right? These are codified rights, right? That our forefathers had the wherewithal to say, we are entitled to these. These were rights provided by nature, okay? By God. Whoever, was, I mean, we were
Whatever your
secular
beliefs
country,
are, they
whatever
are
your belief
inalienable
was,
rights.
but they had said that these were rights that we are all entitled to. They are not up for question. Okay? They were codified because they thought at some point in time some asshole would come along and say you aren't entitled to that. That's why they were put into the Constitution. And now what we have is we have a party, okay, that is saying no, 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 no. The Constitution, we can take those rights away from you, right?
So
Because they've taken the 4th, 5th, 7th, 9th, 10th, 14th amendments all away from you, 14th amendments all away from you. We've had violations of every single one of those.
every single one of them in this administration. Yeah. So and that's the funny part, because the Constitution is supposed to be above all the law, right? This is the foundation. Like we talk about what's a republic? Oh, we're not a democracy. We were a republic, not a democracy. Jesus, people, do you understand? We can look up. Just take out a dictionary. You got a phone. Look it up. Republic is simply a formation of government. We have all different types of republics. Our ideology, or our basis upon our government, is representative democracy, not direct democracy, which I think we should really head that way. Think about that. And I'm going to touch on that briefly, okay, a little later on. All right, but we
That'll
are
be a good conversation.
representative democracy, where we elect representatives to go into government and act on our behalf. That isn't happening. And this goes back to party loyalty, since the whole Doge thing began at the beginning of this administration. A lot of people were outraged, and Republicans came out in town halls to speak to their constituents about how great this is. And what they got were people saying, "What the fuck is going on?" And then we watched those people get dragged out of those meetings. And little by little, they simply stopped doing those town halls, stopped talking to their constituents. And yet, these same people who are outraged by all this are like, "But I trust my party." Like, you were outraged. That's the right reaction. You're questioning them. That's the right thing to do. And then they're saying, "Well, we don't have to respond to you." And you're like, "Okay, I'll just have to trust you." No! No! The answer is you got to keep on pushing. This is my point of party loyalty. You just accept whatever that shit they're handing you because it's your party. When maybe someone from another party, whether it's Democrats or independents or an unaffiliated person who might not have the massive platform that your party representative does, is telling you what they can do to make things better for you, and you don't want to hear that because they're not in your party. That is what I'm sort of getting at.
I think there's more to it than that. I really do. I mean, part of it has to do with the fact that somewhere, I want to say like in the early 90s, there was a deal made. We have to keep in mind the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are both corporations.
Yes.
And here's the thing. Their whole job is to serve the public. But have you noticed, like,
That don't
and
happen no
and
more.
we used to have the ability, and I mean, I know I'm talking a long time ago, but we used to have the ability to go into our, politician's office, our senator's office, our state senator, whatever, and speak to them Just walk in and say, "Hey, I want to speak to my congressman," and they would talk to you. I can't tell you the number of times that my mother would go into Ben Gilman's office, God rest his soul, and would just talk to him.
He
He
was
would be
great.
there, and he would he would handle the problem. Now, what do you have? You have constituent services. You have to go to
Yes.
constituent services, right? So these parties don't represent people. Okay? They just don't. They don't represent average people. Both of them, right? They're corporations, and their job is to, and at some point in the 90s what they said is we want the money, you want the money. Okay? So let's split up the country. And they split up the country.
Yeah.
Okay? So the red states are red states because Democrats don't compete in those states. Okay. And that's intentional. Just like Republicans really don't compete in blue states. Okay. It's just the way it is. Okay. Because that's the way the parties have split everything up. And the reason that they split everything up that way was because that's the way the oligarchs in this country wanted it. It makes it
The
easier to pass things that they want. It makes it easier for them to get their taxes cut. It makes it easier for them to get government contracts. It makes it easier for them to combine, right, without regulatory oversight. Okay, all the things that they want. Okay,
Yes.
and that's what people don't seem to understand is so when you look at these southern states, you look at states like Tennessee and Alabama and those type of states. The reason that they're not, the reason why they won't vote Democrat is fairly simple. Democrats abandoned them. Democrats
Right.
ran away. Okay, how can you trust somebody to look after your interests when at your time of need they ran away from you? They
And
abandoned those states.
why did that happen? Probably because they were the big corporate donors
Well,
paid
that's
to
what I
keep
just
it.
said. Yeah,
Yeah,
they divided up the country, right? And the Democrats said that they wouldn't compete. I mean, look at, so we're going to talk about Virginia in a second, but let's look at Virginia as an example of exactly that. When right at the beginning of them talking about gerrymandering, okay, you had Tim Kaine, the senator, right, for from that state, come and talk to the local Democrats, right, the Democratic leaders, and say, we don't want the Democrats to have all the seats. Let's make it more even so that the Democrats and Republicans share those seats. Okay. Democrats have already understood that the only way for them not to have to actually do anything is for Republicans to maintain somewhat of a slight majority, right? The whole thing is the balance. And the only way to keep that balance is to make sure that no one party has an overwhelming majority. This way, anytime they want to pass something, it's like you always need somebody from the other side. So Democrats will never get anything that they want, right? And Republicans will always get what they want, right? And there'll always be a different Democrat being a traitor and voting with the Republicans. And that's all intentional. That's all intentional. Again, I go back to the performative nature of what these two organizations are.
right. And and just to that point of what, well, I guess I don't know if we want to go into that right at this moment, going into what's happening in Virginia with
I don't know. It's
redistricting.
up to you.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's a really good topic, and it kind of fits what we're talking about.
it fits what we're talking. So as many of you know, Virginia voted a few weeks ago. They put the vote, and this is what I meant by direct democracy, in the sense that they took a referendum. I'm saying we should do it for every single thing, but for specific things, such as a referendum regarding redistricting, and gave it to the people and asked them to vote whether or not they wanted to do this. While we have red states just not even listening to people, not even giving people a chance, citizens, a chance to comment on redistricting, they are going full bore, especially since the SCOTUS decision. Um, but Virginia did it democratically. They said, here's a referendum. We're going to vote on this date, yes or no. And it passed. They wanted to do redistricting. It was actually not even a permanent thing, just temporarily in order to sort of, combat what's happening in red states. And so that was challenged. It was appealed. It went to the Court of Appeals, and they have, I believe they have 9. I think they have 9 or 7. I'm sorry. I think they have 7 judges on the state's Court of Appeals, which is like their highest court. And of course, it's a 4-3 majority. And on party lines, the 4 Republicans voted to cancel out their decision. Right? No, I'm sorry. This violates Virginia's state constitution, and therefore you can't do it. So I was watching Legal AF with Michael Popok, and he was talking with Mark Elias. They're now collaborating on a lot of things now, which is pretty cool. And they talked about the fact that this is the highest court in Virginia's, in the state of Virginia, and therefore it can't really go further. Well, just I guess on Friday, I saw that in fact the state is appealing to the Supreme Court on this issue. And so just for just a sort of a quick explanation, when you appeal a case to the Supreme Court, it's the Supreme Court only can talk on constitutional issues. And I think that's on some constitutional ground. Otherwise, you'd be appealing everything. You'd be appealing, dog bites to the Supreme Court. So you can't appeal everything to the Supreme Court, but it must be on a constitutional ground. And I think that's where they're going in the case that the Court of Appeals in Virginia overturned the democratic voices of the state. In a sense, when the people voted for that referendum, they voted to briefly, to temporarily change the state's constitution with regard to redistricting. We don't want to go with that. And the people spoke, and it's their state, and they're the citizens. And so 4 people said, no, you don't have that right to do that. And, and again, meanwhile, in Louisiana, we have the election actually going on. Right now, their primaries are going on. And the governor of Louisiana declared a state of emergency to stop that election while the people are voting. They're actually speaking their voices right now with their vote, correct? And they said, no, sorry, can't do that right now. We have to redistrict. It's an emergency. And they went as far, just to understand how SCOTUS decisions go, when they make a decision, they have 32 days to put it in writing. They asked the SCOTUS, could you speed that along so we can continue with invalidating 40,000 votes that have already cast? And they said, sure, no problem, right? 5 months ago, 2 Democratic states wanted to do redistricting, and the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. It's too close to an election. But meanwhile, they stopped and they allowed the governor to stop an election in progress to redistrict. So all of a sudden, we're seeing massive, massive partisanship going on, definitely within SCOTUS. And so I'm very
We've always seen that. We've always seen that.
not to this level. It's on steroids at this point.
No, we listen. We've always seen it. What we have to differentiate though is the idea of what is a state law or the state constitution versus federal constitution. I mean, each state has its own constitution. Like New York has a constitution, okay? Virginia has a constitution, okay? And those, and in some of those deep red states, they don't have some of those protection laws in there. The reason that they have them in sort of like these northern states is the fact that the wealthy, the billionaire class, wanted protections for Republicans in the state to ensure that their interests, that Democrats didn't completely, gerrymander out Republicans. In southern states, though, we had made the right Democrats had given up in those states, so those protections were never put in place because they were already billionaire states. They
Yeah.
were already being run for billionaires. So, like, we have to keep in mind the oligarchy in this country really can. I mean, this the entire this entire administration has really kind of highlighted this idea that representative democracy, we don't live in a representative democracy. The oligarchs make all the decisions.
Yeah.
And you may disagree with me on that. You may want to argue with me on that. You may want to say just that that's not true, that I'm a liar, whatever. But every other country is now seeing this
Yeah.
firsthand. The fact that we here in New York just got our budget deal done and there wasn't even a wealth tax. And the majority of the public, now over 80% of the people, want a wealth tax. Okay? Want an income tax on the highest bracket, on the billionaires in this country. All right. And Hochul said no. Okay. And we're seeing this now across the country where Democrats are showing their true colors. They are showing that they're bought and paid for by AIPAC, that they're bought and paid for by the billionaire Epstein class, and and we have very little say in anything, and that's why we need to get rid of this partisan nonsense and understand all you're being done is being fed propaganda, and
Yes.
we need to understand what the truth is, and we need to start voting that way because there are things that we want. You know, I I pointed out, I was thinking a lot about this what we've been talking about, this partisanship. And what came to me is why are young people gravitating we see young people gravitating towards the Republican Party. Not so much Democrats, although on some of the social issues, they are gravitating towards Democrats, and we're starting to see Democrats make strides, especially as social Democrats take hold. But, Democrats gave us the 40-hour work week, 9 to 5, 40-hour work week. Okay. And for the most
And
part,
overtime for
and
going
overtime, right?
beyond.
We've all been happy with that. But what this next generation that's coming out of school, they're not 9 to 5 workers. That's not
They're
the
working
environment
3
we're in anymore.
jobs. Yeah,
But it's just not the environment that we're in anymore. 9 to 5 is not the environment that we're in anymore. And there are a lot of rules and laws that are in place that just don't fit the time. And you don't have any politician addressing them at all. And I think that that's really what it comes down to is some of those rules, right, are prohibiting younger people from actually making money because it's so restrictive.
mhm,
We're seeing kids get fired because they don't want to work a 9 to 5 job. They have shit that they got to do, and they want to be able to work when they work, and they want to, they could be just as productive working an 8-hour day, but not having that 8-hour day be consecutive. Okay. And we're seeing that the world is changing and that the US economy is not changing. The laws are not changing. Neither party has any desire to make any changes whatsoever that would benefit the people. Okay? All they care about is the billionaires and the billionaire class, and that's it, and and making money for them, because it's now just the capitalism on steroids. It's fascism on steroids.
yeah,
Just everything has to be done. I mean, if a Democratic candidate or a Democratic CEO, okay, came out with a manifesto talking about single payer health care and and work, the working class and 3 4 day work weeks and all this other kind of crap, right? They would be labeled a socialist or a communist. They'd be like, oh my God, this communist manifesto. We need to like get rid of this person. And you know, that person would be tried as Antifa or whatever, right? Like it would be like the end of the world. We would see this as the end of the world. I mean, look at what they're doing with Hassan Piker, right? Like, I mean, you know, and
Oh,
censoring the
yeah.
guy. Okay. Peter Thiel, right? The CEO of Palantir comes up with a manifesto, a fascist manifesto, 100% fascist, where he's talking about merging AI corporate world with the government so that they work as one together. Okay. And
Oh.
not one person has said anything about it. Nobody comes out against it, right? It's now, well, and what do we see? We see that this is being embraced. This type of ideology is being embraced by both Democrats and Republicans. Look at all the flock cameras that we have here in New York. Look at all the flock cameras that they have in Massachusetts. Look at all the flock cameras that they have in Ohio, in Illinois, in California, and all these other states, right? Everything is being turned over to AI.
To watch you. But it's interesting because again, this is kind of coming back to exploiting party loyalty, right? Because
Yes.
back when Bush Jr. was president, we were dealing with the Iraq War, that whole clusterfuck. A little law was introduced that a lot of Republican constituents spoke out against, as well as Democrats. It was called the Patriot Act.
Yes.
And the Patriot Act was, just to kind of sum it up, it was basically allowing the government to commit surveillance upon the citizenry because we're looking for terrorists. You hear that message a lot today because now they're redefining, the government is redefining what terrorists are, but they need to monitor all of us. Because guess what, folks? Every promise that was made to you for Trump to come into office, he's really reneged on. I suppose you could make the argument for the immigration one, but that was, again, the promise was getting the worst of the worst. Now they're getting your neighbors. They're getting people who paid taxes. They're getting people who never committed a crime. They're taking children, right? And you're still sort of cheering that on. Yeah, but they're criminals, right? They weren't considered criminals until your leaders started to label them as criminals. Now, your whole perception is that immigrants are criminals. Do you see how that works? That's how propaganda works. And you're losing your principles. Now, you hated Biden because gas prices are up. Well, now gas prices are in the same place, and you're like, I'm okay paying a little bit more. It's okay. It's just temporary. It's not temporary. What's
No.
happening? What's happening over in Iran? It's going to last for a very long time, and chances are you're not going to see anything under $3 for maybe ever. Okay, because of how bad it is. But don't worry, the corporate oil industry is making massive profits because that's really what it's about. It's about
Long-term
money.
consequences.
Yeah.
Long-term consequences too. It's what we talked about, the long-term consequences.
And so this surveillance, coming back to surveillance, all this surveillance that came about as a result of the Patriot Act. And now what Neil just said with Palantir merging with the government and all the flock cameras and all the surveillance, it's not just on Democrats, it's on everybody in the
On
country.
Republicans, it's everybody.
It's everybody because eventually you're going to wake up because it's going to take a long time and things are getting more and more expensive. And so they need to keep an eye on all of us in case we all wake up and unify and realize the problem is not left or right. It's always been the top against the bottom and the middle and the slightly above the middle. It's just the tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of people who want to control everything. And they use this exploitation of the parties to keep us divided because if we're unified, they can't get us. What do you say, Neil?
Yeah, so just I want to bring up a story about the flock cameras to understand, so that people understand exactly how this information is being used. So I recently there are two things that I recently read about. Okay. The first one was that that Pat Ryan, who is our congressman, okay,
Yes.
is introducing Miranda's law on the federal level. Basically, what that does is it extends domestic violence protections, right, to family members of domestic violence victims. Related to a woman, I believe in Wappingers, who was killed by her mother's boyfriend. Okay. Okay. Prior to getting killed, she had sought a protective order in court, and the court wouldn't do it because obviously, this she wasn't dating this person. This person was her mother's boyfriend. So the protections, couldn't be extended to her. So she couldn't get the protection order. And this woman ended up getting killed by her mother's boyfriend. All right. So he's introducing that law. All right. Not saying that that is a bad law. It's a good law. But here's the problem that we have. The next article I read, right, was about a Texas woman, okay, who fled the state because of her abusive boyfriend. Okay. So she was dating somebody who was abusing her, who was beating her up. Okay. And she ended up getting pregnant, and she broke up with him. She left the state, and she went to another state and got an abortion in the state of Illinois, where it's legal. Okay. The ex-boyfriend, who the police knew was not only an ex-boyfriend, but was abusive because there were court records that showed that he was abusive, went to the police in Texas and said, "My girlfriend's missing. Can you help me find her?" The local sheriff's department there literally accessed 83,000 flock
Remember
cameras.
this?
83,000 flock cameras all throughout the United States, found out every location that this woman had been to, including her final destination in Illinois. Okay. Had the police reached out to the police in Illinois, who then went and questioned the woman, right? In Illinois, questioned the woman. She was never arrested. She was never charged with a crime. She didn't commit any crimes. There was no legal basis for this violation, right? In fact, when they put out the bolo, right, for the flock cameras, it said abortion. That was it.
Yeah.
Illinois has a law that protects women who flee to the state for abortion. So Illinois wasn't supposed to release that information at all, but they did anyway, because law enforcement all works together and they stick together. Okay. So now this woman has been tracked by her abusive ex-boyfriend, who she was trying to escape, right, by the local police in Texas, who used 83,000 flock cameras to find
To
his
track her
ex-girlfriend
down.
and to track her down, right? Nobody was arrested. Nobody was held accountable. Police weren't fired. Police, in fact, everybody came down and said, "Oh, the police acted responsibly," yada, 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 right? Nothing happened to any of
Not
these
that
people except this woman ended up getting traumatized again because law enforcement didn't actually do their job properly.
No, it's an
Okay? Because
egregious abuse of their power.
because because what and so then the question becomes, who has access to these flock cameras? Can these flock cameras be accessed by anybody at any time? Where does this information go? What protections are there for privacy for individuals? What protections are there for women who suffer from domestic violence? We keep talking about this. We keep talking about this. This is what's so frustrating. We keep talking about victims of domestic violence, and yet every fucking time, the police either violate laws or police don't do their job and allow these individuals to continue abusing these women, right? Why? Because there really isn't laws. People really don't care, right? At the end of the day, people just are going to do whatever the fuck they want.
Well,
Okay.
that
And this goes to, right, this is what you were saying. This goes to the government is now has access to this information. They've handed it over to private companies. Okay. So now you are being tracked. Driver profiles of you are now being created here in New York.
yeah.
Driver profiles are being created of you and your driving history and how you drive and all those type of things for the eventuality that you're going to get a ticket, and then they can assign you the amount of points that you're going to get and figure out how much money you owe.
As
Okay.
and just to expand on that, not just on if you violate a specific crime that you're charged, that's how it's supposed to work. No, they're gonna use all of that data to convict you of a crime because of what they saw on camera. Like unbelievable surveillance like we've never seen before.
There was a woman, all right, who there was a crime committed, right? And she was in a neighboring town, okay? And they tried to use flock cameras to solve the crime, okay? They went to her house, okay, with an arrest warrant and said, we have you on flock camera, right? In this in the vicinity of where this crime was, and you were the only one that could have committed this crime. Okay? She says, "Well, I want to see the video." No, we're not going to show you the video. Right? So they refused to show her the evidence against her. They refused to, right? They just said you were in the vicinity, and she was like, "I was never there. I never went to that town." Right? I wasn't there at that point in time. Okay? She had to prove her innocence in order to get them to drop the charges, right? We have gone from innocent until proven guilty to guilty until proven innocent.
Interesting. Yeah. That's exactly where we're at. And just so you pointed it out, you mentioned that all of that data is being controlled by the private sector, more specifically, billionaires in the private sector. The
And
people
now
that are
they can
in oh,
right.
let me finish first.
Yep.
And our entire cabinet that Trump has selected, almost all of them are billionaires who are controlling different levels of government. And we have market manipulation on an egregious scale where members of Congress are rising to the level of billionaires and multi-millionaires because they're doing all the insider trading, right? So they don't want to lose their seats, right? Because it's a cash cow for them. Our entire government is being run by the wealthiest tiny percent in the country, and they are connected to all of these corporations, right? All of these conglomerations. It's the reason why we used to be against monopolizing. For this reason, this consolidation of power, consolidation of corporate power, and they have all of our records and they are surveilling us. The thing with the cars, I think, was it you who sent that to me? The thing with the cars starting in, I think, 2027. Your car is going to decide whether or not you can take a drive, right? It's going to have scanning, specifically your eyes. You think of the movie Minority Report, literally that coming to life. And your car will look at you, and if you're think about that woman who just drove from Texas to get away from her abusive boyfriend, right? She probably got in the car. She's upset because she's pregnant and doesn't want to be. And then the car looks at her and says, "Oh, you're too stressed, right? Your pupils are dilated." And the car doesn't go. And he's chasing her down, trying to prevent her from getting away. Like that's what we're living in. Like literally a sci-fi movie come to life. And this comes about a lot to do with going back to party loyalty. That these
But it,
things came about where you didn't think about. You thought, well, my party must be doing this because this is the right thing to do. They're protecting me. When in fact, they're doing it to you, right alongside the rest of us.
there are no protections here. There are absolutely no protections,
Not for us.
and you have to keep in mind, right? With if everything is being uploaded into AI, right? They could basically convict you on anything because now they can just make up anything that they want. AI can create any type of picture, any type of video, right, to portray anything, right? Any crime, anything that they decide that they're going to throw at you. And you have no idea if it's real or not. I mean, there are so many times, right? I mean, how many times think about your own personal life. How many times have you seen something come across your feed, your social media feed, and you thought it was real and it turned out not to be real?
Oh God,
Okay?
we made that mistake right here on this show.
Right, because of the fact that there are no protections being put in place, right? Because at the end of the day, they don't want the protections because this is all intentional, right, to create a underclass of people, right? Both parties creating an underclass of people, right, who are subservient to the billionaire donor class.
Yeah, who's getting rich on our money.
It's essentially what it is. Take, 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 take. Never
Yep.
give. Take, 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 take. I mean, remember, we are at war. Prices are going up, right? And what are the billionaires saying? The billionaires are saying, you
Cashing
cannot
in.
have my money. I am not giving 1 penny more to the government. I'm not giving 1 penny more. They're the ones profiting off of the war, off of all this kind of stuff. And where are we? We don't get
But
anything.
we're the ones paying for it all.
Correct. We're the ones paying for it all. They pay for nothing, and they're unwilling to even contribute to the cost. Okay. They are telling you we aren't paying a dime. Okay. And Plattner's right about one thing, right? There is an opportunity this year to see who is spending money on each one of our campaigns that are being whatever district that you live in, and for you to say, I'm not going to vote for that because that person is bought and paid for by APAC, or that person is bought and paid for by Palantir or the tech bros or whatever, right? I want somebody who's going to actually represent me. And remember, if you think that money, right, is the way to get your guy elected, okay, so you want to go with the APAC guy, okay, remember, they ain't there to represent you. They're there to represent the person who gave them the money to get there.
Exactly. That's it. That's it. This is the reason why, and we have said this multiple times on this show, how it's so important to look at the candidates, especially while we're in the midst of primary season, to look at the candidates that didn't get finance that way, that are the grassroots people. And Graham Plattner is one of those people to a certain degree. And definitely look at how Mom Donnie did it, right? Walked all across Manhattan, shook hands, met people, talked to people about what their needs were. Those are the candidates you want. They're not as flashy. No, they don't have beautiful AI created commercials that are just all fucking bullshit anyway. You know, they're just real people. Maybe they have a little platform and you can follow them and they're creating their own content and it's not very professional looking like us because we don't have much of a budget here. But but same kind of thing, right? What Graham Plattner is, he's a working class guy with working class issues that the vast majority of the millions and millions of people deal with every day. A billionaire doesn't understand your problems. Oh, they'll tell you that they do. Whatever works, right? Salesmanship.
You have more in common with the working poor in this country than you will ever have in common with a billionaire. And that's
Especially one.
everybody who watches our podcast. I'm going to tell you that's exactly the case. You may not think so. You may say, well, I have my home. Well, you have nothing. You have nothing. It all can be taken away just like that. Okay? The billionaires are taking, and taking.
Yeah. And
and
they're putting the infrastructure in place to take more.
Yes. Remember, every time you have this new infrastructure that gets put somewhere, who pays for it? You pay for it. So you're paying for your own demise. You're paying to be spied on. You're paying to be watched. You're paying to have a driver's profile. You're paying for every single thing. You're paying for every flock camera that goes up, that monitors you. They know where
So
you've been, where you're going, who you've been with. They know everything.
yes. But on a slightly more positive note, you shared with me a video last week in which a municipality um, realized what the flock cameras were being used for, and they got in and voted to take them all down. That's a local municipality. That's where you start really taking back your power. Obviously, we're all going to vote in the nationwide general election, but don't forget what's happening locally. Your local elected officials are there, and they are accessible, and you can show up to town halls, and you can bring up the flock camera issue, and say, "I don't want to be watched." I can understand at a traffic intersection for accidents to a certain degree, provided that's all it's used for, provided that data doesn't get transferred to Palantir or to anyone else, that it's used for the sole purpose of tracking an accident and what you can do to fix that intersection to make it safer.
Well,
But all over the place?
well,
No.
the real the question that needs to be asked, and this is what people need to start going into the local municipalities and asking, especially if they have those type of flock cameras in their what are the policies and procedures around the flock cameras? Who has access to them? Do you have any access user access list, right? Do like, because do your employees have access to some of these cameras? What's going on? Like, what protections are in place from abuse? You know, like, if your local politicians, the answer is I don't know. Okay, then you and trust me, I think that's gonna be a lot, because I think a lot of these things get installed and a lot of the politicians don't know, and so you gotta kinda go look for it. But yeah, fucking look.
Yeah.
Like, now's the time. Like, don't wait for something to happen that's bad, and then like that Ohio town, right, that had that problem, okay? Something happened there. It was being used and abused because I think it was like a local police officer was stalking people, right? Like, people are actually like, local law enforcement has been using the cameras, a lot of them, not a lot of them, but there are some now that have been documented that have been using the flock cameras to stalk either exes or stalk a woman that they're interested in, or to stalk a boyfriend. Like, they're being used for, like, all these fucking nefarious things because there are no protections. There are no, like policies and procedures around them, right?
So
There
that
should
and
be.
there absolutely should be. Think about this. Think about surveillance of political opponents. It's
Right.
another thing. So, again, everything starts locally. You can go into your municipality and you could talk to them about proposing laws, legislation on a local level, on a county level, and then on up to the state level that, um, you know, either removes the cameras or limits where that data that those cameras collect, what that data is, and how that data can be used, right?
And
They're
who has
just
access,
and who has access exactly. It's
which is the
interesting.
big one.
It's a huge one, right? It's a
Right.
huge one, and if you are, let's say, being targeted for whatever reason, maybe you have a right to know that to a certain degree, so whatever it is, you have to create laws. And it's just so funny that we bring this up, because here we are in the United States of America, the quote unquote land of the free, where we're putting this infrastructure in place to, let's face it, limit our freedoms, limit our privacy. They're attacking the 14th Amendment, which has a lot to do with privacy. But China is making laws to restrict AI and how it is used against its population. How is it in this day and age that China is doing human rights better than us? We've prided ourselves on being the civil rights and the rights country, and we're just throwing that, casting all that aside.
And
Eh,
and and for for my Republican colleagues and maybe even some of my Democrats who like to say, "Well, I don't do anything wrong, so it doesn't bother me." Here's what I'm going to say. Stop quoting Joseph Goebbels from the Nazis. Seriously. Like, holy,
Yes.
I've never seen a group of people, right,
Coping,
who love
coping.
quoting fucking Nazis. I
I
don't get it. I really don't get it. You fucking love the Nazis so much that you got to quote them every fucking chance you get. I'm sorry. You know what? I don't do anything that anybody would care about, but I still don't want to be fucking watched. I still have a Fourth Amendment right.
yeah, yeah, that's
I
a
didn't give that up.
that's exactly what you're doing, and you're making a coping excuse. Well, I'm not a bad person. Until they deem you as a bad person. Till they deem freedom of speech that doesn't agree with what the regime wants is suddenly a bad thing. And we're seeing that in real time.
Pre-crime.
So,
We're
yep.
all ready
Pre-cri-
for pre-crime
yeah,
and Minority Report, because that's the next thing that they're talking about, right? So in that defense authorization bill that you talked about, right, the renewal of the Patriot Act, right? It talks about how if you have a belief in Antifa, right? So in other words, you are an anti-fascist and you have anti-fascist beliefs, you're now a terrorist. Keep that in mind. You may not have done anything wrong, but if you're against fascism, right, just for thinking it, the government can come in and label you a terrorist and arrest you and try you and convict you.
NSPM 7
Just
that came
remember
out.
that.
Yep, that's the executive order NSPM 7 that came
No, it's
out.
now in the law. They're now
Eh,
codifying it in law.
Think about that. Laws that are permitting you to be watched at an unconscionable level for everything. Larry Ellison, I'm going to go back to Larry Ellison. He was quoted on camera. You can find the video. Go look it up. Or search it on YouTube or Google, whatever, where he says this whole idea of privacy. Now, no, we're gonna be watching. Everyone's gonna be on their best behavior because we're gonna be watching you. Billionaires, the billionaire class that owns the government, that paid for the politicians, that's limited your voice, that's taking away your democracy, are going to be watching you. Whether you like them, if you're loyal to them, that's good. Stay that way, or else. Or those of us that are seeing what's happening and are speaking out against it and are trying to get you to see what we see.
So another thing I want to bring up, because it just got revealed recently, and I want people to understand, right? This is local government, this is your politicians, and this is why it's important matter. In Georgia, right, just outside Atlanta, right, they have a new AI data center. Okay,
Another one.
they installed a new AI data center. Okay, the local residents, a very wealthy community, I might add, right? Very wealthy community, all of a sudden realized that their water pressure was really, really low, and they couldn't understand why their water pressure dropped so much. Okay. Turns out that the AI data center used 29 million gallons of water. They had two industrial water lines hooked up to the data center, neither of which were on the plans, neither of which they actually paid the local community for. So all that water went to the data centers, and the local community didn't receive one dime from user fees related to that water. That is their water. And what do the local politicians do? Did anybody get arrested? Did anybody do it? No, they're just looking the other way. Nobody's getting the data center isn't going to reimburse the fucking community. Nothing's going to happen to these people because you have local politicians that don't give a shit. That would that have taken money right from these developers to put this data center there, and therefore they're just enough. We have to say enough.
This is out of control. Out of
It is.
control, and it's getting worse, and it's
Yep.
going to be used against all of us. if we do not act, if we do not stand up, if we do not speak up, if you do not, you know, your politicians, yeah, they're on the payroll, but what is that saying? When your government doesn't fear us, then you have tyranny, but when the government fears the people, then you have democracy. And so we need to speak together, have conversations together about this and realize that this is unprecedented surveillance, watching, and ultimately it's tyrannical on a level we've
Well,
probably never seen before.
when you're making everybody poor and you're stealing everybody's money, and the expectation is that these wealthy people are hoarding, they expect that the American people will eventually rise up and want to take back their country. And the billionaires are putting the mechanisms in place to ensure that that doesn't happen. So we could either, and I think that that may be more of what Graham Plattner is sort of talking about, and when he talks, is this idea that if we don't do something now, they're going to have everything set up, and then by the time that we realize that we should fight back, it'll be too late at that point. As I said, I think we already are too late, but we're now seeing a lot of this stuff. We really have to, like, now's the time. Now's the
Now's the
time
time.
we gotta look at other candidates, and we gotta start seeing, like, this is a real problem. Like, holding like, it's only Hochul versus Blankman. Blankman sucks, right? So we have to hold Hochul accountable. We
Yes.
we have to start pushing her in a different direction because, you know, she's in bed with these people too, you
But
know?
it's interesting. I was watching a podcast earlier this week. Apparently, Hochul has expressed an interest in doing the redistricting going forward, regardless of constitution. Whether or not she
Well,
does it is
well,
another thing.
yeah. I mean, we just saw this week too, though, that there's one of the women running for governor in Minnesota. Okay, and I can't remember her name. Okay, there are three people running for governor in Minnesota. Two of them are women. One of them is a man. And the two women, one is on the tech with the tech bros, right? And the other woman is with APAC, and the guy is running as a social democrat, right?
That's your guy.
So right. So he's now been coming up in the polls. APAC sends out an email, right, saying we need to get more money for the woman who's in the front runner, right? Who I think is the current governor. Okay. And then we need to, at this, in the same fundraising memo, they're fundraising for Susan Collins.
Yeah.
Okay. So it just shows you that the moneyed interest, it's not about, for them, it's not about party. We all sit there. This is what I mean about party loyalty. This is what Denise is talking about when we talk about party loyalty. When it comes to the billionaires, they don't give a shit about party. They are willing to buy people from either party. Okay. This is why we need to be so conscious of how we vote and who we vote for this year. Okay. And we need to make sure that we get people in office who are actually serious, right, about governing. Okay. And serious about representing the people and not representing the corporations, because I can tell you that is a bad look when you have a fundraising email for a MAGA Republican as in the same email as a Democrat,
Yeah.
because it just shows you, right, what I've been saying all along is there really isn't much of a difference. It's like MAGA and then MAGA light. And the
Yeah.
MAGA light
Yeah.
is just like,
Diet
yeah,
MAGA.
we're willing to, we're, it's right. It's diet MAGA, right? We got MAGA and diet MAGA, and enough's enough. Like we have to understand, maybe that governor isn't maybe all for 100% like for ICE, but they're sitting on the same fence that a lot of the Democrats are, where they're saying, well, ICE just needs to be reformed and trained better, right? Which we now know is not true. They're trained like a lot of the ones that are out there, the people who were killed, right? Like who did the murdering of Alex Preddy and Renee Good had been in ICE. There were lifetime members of ICE. They had been there for 10 plus years.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. They had been highly trained. We know that the raid that occurred on the building that happened in Minnesota, right? They were using Black Hawk helicopters. Those guys were an elite ICE force meant to protect our border, right? These are not untrained people. These are highly trained people.
And
You know?
But what
So
they're not trained to do is to work with American citizens, but they don't care about that.
right.
They don't
But it's the
they don't care.
propaganda. The propaganda is that the Democrats sit there and they say, well, they need to be trained better. They need, right? So it's this idea, right? The Republicans are telling, are essentially telling the truth. Like, they're trained fine. They're doing exactly what we're telling them to do, right? Whereas Democrats are sitting there lying to you, saying that they're not trained, right? Like this there's propaganda on both sides. We just have to see through it and say and call it out when we see it. And that's what we've been doing. That's what a lot of people have been doing. That's why a lot of like Democrats have been falling by the wayside. That's why, the leadership has been falling by the wayside. This is why the DNC can't raise any money. Okay. It all comes down to, it's pretty clear they don't represent Americans. They don't represent average Americans. Americans don't trust them. Okay. And they want new people, and new people are winning. New people are winning, and new people are being supported. I'm supporting a lot of Democrats who are winning. I'm supporting progressives, and people who want to change, who are going to represent us.
People.
Right.
And that's
And our needs.
and our needs, and that's kind of just to tie it up. You have to sort of put your loyalty to the party aside. Oh, I've always voted Republican, or I've always voted Democrat. No, now you have to be loyal to people. Loyal to people, to the people that represent what your needs are, not regardless of party, you know?
Like, so we talk about energy costs. I just want to finish up with this because we talk
Okay.
about energy costs, right? And I know we've been going a while, but think about this. Democrats and Republicans, if they really wanted to represent people at this time, right, when energy prices are clearly going through
Oh,
the roof,
yes.
what they could immediately do is reinstitute the ban on speculators in the marketplace. Okay. It was taken away by Clinton in the late 90s, right? It was put on in the early 80s, right, under Reagan, okay, because speculators in the marketplace were driving up the prices of oil and gas, okay? Now we have speculators in the marketplace, which these guys fucking love, because we can see that with the fluctuating gas prices, because every time he
Mhm.
makes an announcement, all of a sudden, the people in the White House and Congress are making fortunes of money, right? We can get rid of those speculators in the marketplace. They can immediately say, we want speculators in the marketplace to represent no more than 10, 15% of buyers in the marketplace, right? By getting rid of the speculators, that would bring down prices immediately. Okay. And Congress has the ability to do that, and they're not doing it.
They're not
Graham
doing it.
Plattner proposed an energy fund, which would help maintain energy prices at a reasonable level for Americans. In other words, the government would subsidize the energy companies to keep energy prices low and to not go over a certain amount. That could also be done. They can do stuff. They are choosing not to. In
Because
Orange County, they had the ability to cap the tax. The Republicans chose not to. Okay.
that's the tax on gas, by the way.
There's a lot of things that the government can do that the government is choosing not to do, just because they just don't want to do it. Because they're benefiting. Their rich friends are benefiting. Their donators are benefiting.
Well, that's it. That's where the loyalty is. The loyalty is
Right.
to the billionaire class, the billionaire class, the ones that feed their pockets. That's where their
Right.
loyalty is. And people who sit here and are loyal, blindly loyal to party, who are being exploited, you need to open your eyes and see that, because they're not doing anything for you or for me or for any of us. They got a plan
Anybody who
and they're
thinks
enacting it.
right. Anybody who thinks that either party is on their side, right? Really needs a wake up call. Needs some some of that death wish coffee.
Yeah.
They need that death wish coffee to wake
Yes.
their asses up because I can tell you right now, it's not happening. None of these. I mean, look at the shit that they're debating in Congress. I mean, there isn't one bill in Congress right now to actually help Americans.
No, no.
Right?
I mean,
None. It's all
no, they
bullshit. $1 billion for a fucking ballroom. I mean,
yeah, that
like this is what they're occupied with.
yeah, that's the ballroom. The
Right.
ballroom. They want they want $1.5 trillion for the military. They want another 70 billion for DHS, and they're slipping in $1 billion for the once $200 million ballroom. Went to 300 that was going to be paid by donors, is now they want you to pay for it. You were all we were always going to pay for it. But they just had to find a way to slip that in, and it
This,
jumped to $1 billion.
this administration is the epitome of let them eat cake.
Oh god, yes. Absolutely.
You know,
Oh my god.
and and if the people in this community in the town of Wallkill don't realize that Steve, Don, and Frank are actually fighting for them and to keep this community like together when it comes to finances and to rebuild what was broken by the clown circus. um I don't know what to say anymore. I mean, they got sold a bag of goods, they bought into that, and now you're gonna pay the price, and it sucks, but you got fooled. you know let's not do the old adage, right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, if you get fooled again, shame on you.
Yeah.
That's all I gotta say.
All right, folks. This has been a long episode, but I appreciate you hanging in there. Look, yeah, we'll make some shorts out of it, but thanks so much for watching. First of all, I want to welcome all our new followers. We've gotten some new followers that have joined us, and we're growing. We're getting there, and we really do appreciate you. And we do appreciate the comments. People have left comments. We've had some interesting conversations there, and so, as always, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Watch us on Tuesday. We do live streams on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. So make sure you click that bell so you get notified. Um, and watch us. We now go live on Facebook too. So you don't even have to come to YouTube if you don't want to. But we always love you here anyway. All right. So be safe, be well, and happy Mother's Day to all the moms. I know this might appear the day afterwards. So at that point, happy belated Mother's Day. All right. And we'll see you soon, guys. We love you. Be well. Take care.
Peace out.